Let's now take a look at the new V-Ray frame buffer in V-Ray 5. The new V-Ray frame buffer has been redesigned to not only enhance your render experience, but also offer powerful new functionality that lets you go beyond rendering. Alright, I've got the VFB open here. To start, let's take a look at these icons at the top right here, which serve as our main render controls. These closely resemble the render controls from V-Ray Next, but are redesigned. Here you'll find the option to save an image out of the VFB, and then next to that is the clear icon, which clears the contents of the frame buffer. Next, we have the option to toggle on rendering based on the proximity to the mouse, and then we have the render region mode, which enables us to draw out a specific region of the image that we'd like to render. Lastly, we have the interactive render button, which lets us interactively make changes to our scene while rendering, the stop render button, and finally, we have the production render button. Next, on the top left here, we have a few drop-down menus, such as the File menu for saving and loading rendered image channels, other menus for accessing the Render and Follow mouse buttons, a View menu for accessing display color space controls, and lastly, the VFB settings, which we'll take a look at in a moment. Down here on the left, we can double-click on this handle here to open up the History panel. Here we can store a history of rendered images with their post-production corrections, and do A/B comparisons between images. However, to use it, we'll first need to enable the history in the VFB settings menu. Simply head over to the History tab, check on Enabled, and then specify a history folder path to save your history images to. You can use your project folder, or add a custom path to a different folder as well. In this case, I'll just paste the folder path I copied in advance here. Finally, click Save and Close to save your changes to the VFB settings. Now the icons up at the top of the History tab become available to use. I'm going to click on the green plus icon here, which will save the image I have rendered currently to the VFB history. You'll see as I hover over the images that I'm given some information about their render times as well. And if I right-click on a saved image here, I can add a note to the saved render, as well as choose from options such as loading in post-processing layers from a saved image. Next, let's click the A/B icon here, which you'll see enables us to do an A/B comparison between images. You'll see we have a few different options here for formatting, as well as the A, B, C, D option to compare up to 4 images simultaneously. Also, note that down below, the toolbar gives us pixel value and coordinate information based on where our mouse is hovering over the image. Alright, now let's head over to the right side of the VFB and click on the handle here to open up this tab. Over here, we have the new Layer Panel editor available in V-Ray 5. Here we have the ability to manage all of our post effects right inside of the VFB, leveraging the power of a layer tree-based editor for doing color corrections as well as light mixing, which we'll cover later on. For a quick overview of the layer editor, you'll see that these color correction layers correspond to the image that I have already loaded in here. For example, we have controls for white balance, curves corrections, filmic tone mapping, exposure settings, and more. To add a new layer for color corrections, you can simply click on the green plus icon or Create Layer button, and then select from the suite of color corrections and tools for adjusting the image. For example, let's click on the filmic tone map, which contains different types of mapping curves and gamma corrections for affecting the image. And you'll see right away that it is added to the top of our layer tree. We'll cover how the layer editor functions in more detail later on, but for a basic understanding, you'll see that each layer has properties below, which we can adjust to fine-tune the look of our image. For example, I can lower the opacity of the filmic tone map correction we added to adjust its visibility. The filmic tone map also has different preset types, which each affect the image by altering the overall light and dynamic range. There are also further parameters below for some preset types to customize the tone mapping. These controls allow you to adjust the dark spots, highlights, and midtones for the image, which you can experiment with to find a look that suits your preference. In this case, I'll leave the type on Ampus and tweak the opacity, which you'll see affects the overall contrast and dynamic range of the image. Alright, now that you've seen how the properties for this particular layer can be tweaked Let's head back up to the top for a moment to glance over the other icons available. Here we can delete the selected layer, and next to that, we have options for saving and loading in layer tree presets, as well as an undo button. We'll demonstrate how these presets can be used in more detail later on. Lastly, we have the Stats tab, which gives us helpful information about the scene in our devices, such as performance and memory tracking data, depending on the scene and the rendering mode.